Name is Judy Nxasana. I wrote the foreword for Lindelwa, Skenjana. What a joy that was. You know, I was just sharing with Lindelwa that her mother, Sister Tammy, and I were pregnant at the same time, and we were swapping notes. Imagine how I feel today as we birth her baby. The Black Girl's Guide, I hope you can see. And she also gave birth 3 weeks ago. I'll ask you later how you do it. But welcome. For those that haven't met Lindelwa, I'd love to introduce her to you. She has 10 years of work experience, having started working in the telecommunications industry. She then moved to a small Black female-owned management consulting firm, specializing in policy and regulation, and later to the financial services sector. As a brand, marketing and communication specialist within the financial services, Lindelwa has moved between retail product marketing, corporate affairs, and digital and data analytics. Appearing on the 2019 Mail and Guardian 200 Young South Africans list, she holds a master's degree in ICTs for development from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom, a Bachelor of Arts honors in brand leadership from the Vega School, and a Bachelor of Social Sciences degree in organizational psychology and industrial sociology from the University of Cape Town. She also holds numerous digital marketing certificates from GIBS, Stellenbosch University, and University of Cape Town's Get Smarter online learning platform. I see you haven't come to WITS yet. We'll be very happy to have you for your PhD. Lindelwa was born in Durban and raised in Pretoria and has lived in Cape Town and Johannesburg. She's passionate about technology and how it can be leveraged to include people who would otherwise have been excluded from mainstream economic activity. She's also passionate about the development of Africa and women empowerment, and is also a founding member of Mbeu Movement, a young professional women social dialogue forum. Welcome, Lindelwa.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. And our cannot do justice. I have so many questions for you, but I'll behave myself. I'll stick to what I prepared. Why the book? And
Fantastic.
why now?
Thank you so much, Ma. And before we get straight into the questions, I just want to start off with gratitude. I want to thank God and the universe for this moment. I also want to thank you in all your glory and your light for allowing yourself to walk with me on this journey in supporting the book and what it stands for. And I want to thank everyone that's gone out to get the book and everyone that's tuned in and is joining us for this conversation this evening. So thank you to everyone for that. About the book, why the book? You know, Ma, there's a Toni Morrison quote that I love that says, if there's a book that you would love to read that hasn't been written yet, it's your duty to write that book. Mm. It is absolutely your duty, you know, and if we want to talk brown skin girl matters, who's more or better equipped to write the book, than the very brown skin girls, secondly. But thirdly, it was informed by a number of conversations. So having been in corporate for a decade, and having conversations with younger women, with women that are my peers, with older women, you know, in the form of mentors or sponsors, and having numerous conversations and the themes that kept on sticking. I also always had personal aspirations of wanting to be an author. And I thought, why not do it? Why not now? There's a lot happening around us. Let's have the discussion. Maybe we're missing something, you know? So those are the things that informed the birth of the book.
That's quite interesting because you quote Toni, and there is Sisonke Msimang that you may or may not know. She says, we need stories, but you need to do something once you've read the story. So I do hope that after this engagement, everyone who's here, and thank you so much for such a great response, does something about it, because I think we need to start a movement that actually tries to change the culture and change the circumstances that Black women especially find themselves. I always encourage young people, especially Africans, to write their own stories about themselves. And it is such a good feeling for the generation that we've given birth to be writing their stories. When I was your age, there wasn't a book by my peers that I could actually learn anything from, let alone from the generation that was before my time. So to have you as my daughter publishing your first book, it's amazing. But I know it's not enough yet in terms of the number of Africans that are writing, especially African women. What can you say? What has been the journey? I know you started writing in 2019. Just demystify the whole thing so that the people that are listening will come out and say, I can do this. Can you walk us through that journey?
Fantastic, Ma. Thank you so much. And thank you for writing the books you've written as well. That really helps. But also, you know, as a part of the journey, my most great writers are also great readers, right? Linking to the Sisonke quote that you just mentioned. But for me, I think what's important is knowing what work you want to dedicate your life to, right? So I think as you read as a part of my bio, my passions are around technology, Africa and African women's development, as well as marketing, right? So I've always found this theme of African women and what we encounter, and you know, in the spaces that we move in and exist in, and you know, and how we treat it, etc. I've always found that interesting. For instance, I even did my master's thesis on the impact of technology on African women, and used case studies, on African women. So firstly, you need to be very clear about a subject matter that you're passionate about, right? And it must be something that doesn't tire you, something that you can perpetually have conversations and discussions about. So for me, I mean, we'll get to, but even the founding of Mbewu, right, which was a young woman in social dialogue, right? I just never tire of speaking to other young women. What are you going through? How are you growing? Are you tapping into your light and into your excellence, etc.? So that was always, you know, a passionate subject matter of mine. Firstly, then the actual journey though, I thought, no, man, if I'm having similar conversations with women that are younger than me, my peers, and women that are older than me, surely something's to be said about documenting this. Where is this being archived? You know, how is it going to get better if we don't have a place to reference these things we keep talking about? So whenever I would experience something, or someone I'd speak to would share an experience that I'd find fascinating, I just started documenting it, before I got to a point where it was bulky enough for me to say, okay, I think we have a book here. I think we have something to work with, right? But then again, being overwhelmed by doing something for the first time, I had to do research around publishing houses, how it works, what you need to do. You need to submit, your manuscript, but is it done? Is it not done? How many words do you need? All of that stuff. So I did that research, and through that process, that's where I landed with a contact at NB Publishers, Tafelberg. I worked with an amazing senior editor. Her name is Umbali Skakane. Hello to her if she's tuned in. And she walked with me on the journey, right? And I mean, it's a bit painful sometimes as a first-time published author, because the publisher will tell you this isn't gonna, like a teacher at school with the red pen mark. This isn't gonna work. This is gonna work. Do this, do that, change this, etc. So then that was the journey, that one went on until we got to the publishing stage. Yeah. And sometimes, I don't know if you went through this, my writer's block is a very real thing. So towards the end of me writing the book, it was just, I just couldn't, anymore, but once you commit to a project, you have to, see it to finish. So that was the journey.
Yeah, that's a beautiful journey. And thanks, Bali, for walking it with her. For me, it was slightly different because publishers didn't like my story. So I was like, oh, fine, I'll publish it myself, you know? So for those who are listening, if publishers don't like your story and you have the passion like Lindelwa is talking about, just go for it. You know, you learn as you go along. Lindelwa, on page 32, you write, Lindy, not every girl has a parent or parents who are able to take them through school. Not every girl had the privilege of being bought their first car by their families. Some girls need to do whatever it takes to survive, close quote. You were raised by a strong, independent matriarch, Usistami, that I have a lot of respect for. What would you say to the Black girl who didn't have a strong professional mother to look up to and learn from? I know Sistami is big on HIV/AIDS, and the impact of that is that we have a lot of orphans who are actually raising their own siblings. What message would you have for them?
Ma, you know, we live in an interesting time, and one of the main reasons I am an advocate for technology is, you know, the availability and, you know, potential access people have to knowledge, right? We are privileged enough that, and I know you're an advocate of this, of telling African stories, that you can go online, you know, and find your role models, right? So not everyone, as you just mentioned, is fortunate enough to grow. You know, their immediate caregivers aren't necessarily their inspiration, you know, in their lives, in their immediate space. So you have to look around you. So, right, if you're growing up in an environment where, in a community where there's a teacher or a principal or, you know, or a doctor or a nurse in your immediate environment, you need to identify those role models for yourself, right? Something I do very deliberately, I guess it's linked to you having clarity of who you want to become as well and who you're trying to be, right? So in my canvas, from a Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi to a Dr. Judy Dlamini or a Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, you know, Dr. Vuyo Mahlatsi, etc. Be very clear, you know, beyond your immediate caregivers, who else? Look around your universe. Because another thing I believe is what you seek is seeking you as well. Yeah. You know, your truth is always ready to meet you. Yeah. So you just need to lift your head up and look around. Those and you'll be surprised that those people are there and they're willing to make the time, you know, when they can. That's the advice I'd give the young Black girl.
That is so true. And especially teachers, I don't think we give them enough credit, but so many kids, their lives have changed, even those that have parents, but they actually had a teacher who just believed in them, and then it just changed their trajectory. So that's very true. In page 36, you talk about workplace incivility. I love that. Tell me more.
Well, I know you don't love it because it's a negative thing. Oh, workplace.
I love the phrase.
Oh, great.
I love the phrase. Look, anything negative we can't love. But what I love is calling it what it is. Because once you do that, then you start finding solutions, which will be my next question. How do you eradicate it?
Yeah, my workplace incivility is such an unnecessary thing, you know? And I think as I write, and I mentioned in the book, I don't think I handled it well at the time in the chapter of the book. Because I think, I mean, growing up, I didn't experience bullying. I didn't experience, so when you're not equipped with some survival tools, when you encounter some things for the first time, it's just a shock to the system. And I think what helped me, which is what I just do in life anyways, is having a close-knit circle of people to share what you're experiencing, right? So having your girlfriends, having family members, my sister-in-law and I talk a lot about workplace issues, you know, speaking to my mother as well, so and my mentors as well. So having people that you can just be like, how, yes, I went through, etc., etc., or, you know, I did a particular thing and you know, I was treated this way, etc. So having a close knit, strong support system that can call things out. Because with that particular chapter, what I ended up doing, there was a mentor, and I'll never forget this conversation, who said to me, you need to call it out. If someone is treating you in a particular manner or speaks to you in a manner which you don't appreciate, you call them out with grace, with kindness, you know, because people have experienced so much. There's that other quote that says, hurt people hurt people. People are so blocked off, and they forget that before being a tool that needs to deliver a particular, you know, outcome, you're a person, you're a human being. So that was the advice that I got, is you just need to call it out. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, hey? And you can imagine, I was a GP for 13 years, calling the shots, not having these incivility incidences. So, and actually I encountered them in my 30s for the first time. So I can completely relate.
Shock to the system, yes.
Yeah. You discussed the power of belonging into an enclave in the workplace. Tell me more about it. Is this the answer to a culture that is hostile as an outsider, perceived outsider? Is this what led to Mbeu that you spoke about earlier? And actually in page 127, you talk about youth movement. Just give me your synopsis on how we deal with this.
Oh, sure, Ma. Look, I think in spaces where different people who come from different backgrounds and have different ambitions, etc., etc. I think as human beings, what we do is we always try to find similarities and likeness, and it sort of brings a sense of comfort, right? And I think there's nothing wrong with that, as long as the intention is not then to pull other people down, right? Another enclave down, or look down on people, or think you're better than, etc. But I think those sort of things, you know, human attrition, I think they always happen naturally. I don't think it's the answer, but I think it's just the way human beings organize themselves, right? But it also shouldn't be you know, a bar against getting to know people that are different from you. I think we need to be very conscious, you know, when that does happen, and why it happens, and how you can use it in a positive way, right? But I don't think it's the answer. We just need to be more aware and more conscious about that. Now with Mbeu movement actually came up. It was a conversation. There's one of my friends, Umatrino, and I had a chat. I think we had gotten to a point where we just felt stuck and we wanted to do more. And we felt we put in the work. You've gone and gotten your degrees, but something just wasn't unlocking. So what we did actually, well, we had a meeting with Dr. Judy Nxasana, and she said to us, she said, young ladies, you need to organize yourselves, right? You guys have something inside of you. You admire us as the elder woman. But what we did back in the day is we started movements, right? If there are things that are concerning you, that are bothering you, the only way to progress the conversation is to organize yourself, right? And not keep it to yourselves, but invite a larger community of young women and have the conversations. Because how do you expect the thing that breaks you, the system or the person that breaks you, can't be the one that puts you together, right? It's your duty.
Yeah,
it's your duty as fellow young. You guys need to do that for each other and for yourselves. So that's how the whole movement was born, and it was such a fascinating time in my life. Yeah,
that's amazing. And may Dr. Vuyo Mahlati rest in power. She was an amazing woman. She's one of the women I interviewed for my thesis, and I also interviewed her for my book. And it's interesting, when we started another movement, I actually called on her. When she passed on, we're busy with another movement, a story for another time. I agree with you that we do need these groups where you feel you belong, you know. I once went to Shell, and I'm not sure if there's anyone from Shell here, but one of the big things about Shell is that they are quite open about LGBT community. Yes, exactly. And so you go to Shell and you can talk about anything when it comes to sexual orientation, and people own that. They are not scared that, oh, I won't be promoted. So what I think what we need to add as corporates is that enable that culture, allow people to organize themselves into a common social identity group, if you like, because if it's accepted and encouraged and supported by the corporate, then you are more likely to be free about it. And it's not exclusionary. You can still network across those groups, but knowing that you have your space, because one of the challenges is that we assimilate into these cultures. So when you walk through the gate, you actually wear this veil to be the person they expect you to be. Whereas if you have your own community, you know, you have a home outside the home. So I completely agree with you. I want to quote Nomthandazo now, who writes in page 132, I quote, "I began to carry the battle and burden of all Black women in the organization. People came to confide in me, and I began to also see how my fellow Black male colleagues were also in many ways some of the greatest perpetrators in this system. I realized deep in my soul that indeed, no one was coming to save me. I was on my own," close quote. Do you share that sentiment? How do you overcome that and wake up every morning and go and face a system where you know you're actually on your own? What's your message to other Black girls? And this is the interesting one. Would you have the same message to Black boys?
Yeah, these gender dynamics become very interesting when you have an opinion.
Yeah.
I would say yes, I do share similar sentiments to Nomthanda's was quoted in the book. It's really unfortunate, right? And I mean, the whole purpose of the book is that for the next generation and for the next Black girl, or you know, a younger Black girl who finds themselves in these spaces, is it doesn't have to take her or them a decade now to find their voice, and if they have found their voice, to use their voice, right? It's just unfortunate because, and again, I mean, the Steve Jobs quote that says you can only connect the dots of your life by looking backwards, all right? You can never connect the dots of your life looking forward, because all of those unfortunate incidents, they help you build resilience, right? They help, but as long as they don't mutate who you are, right? I'm not a you know, a more aggressive person or louder person because of all those unfortunate things I may have also encountered, similar to Nomthandazo. But what became important to me, is just, again, clarity of who you are, clarity of who you're becoming, clarity on your values and what you stand for, you know, what sort of energy you surround yourself with, what you will allow, what you won't allow. And I mean, the more you keep practicing that, you know, it sort of, you know, things become easier and you know how to cope and deal better. But unfortunately, you know, incidents such as that Nomthandazo quotes are very real. They do exist, but you just need to find the strength within you. There's another quote that I like, actually, that says, as a seed or as a flower, if a flower doesn't grow where it's planted, it's not because the seed isn't capable of growing, but it's because the environment, right? So sometimes you just need to then change environments if you recognize yourself as that seed and that flower that needs to bloom, you know? So that's what's helped. Yeah.
That's powerful, because I always say to young people that it doesn't matter how difficult things get, you have to make sure that you are respected. They may not like you, they may make the environment hostile, but once they disrespect you, you need to reject it. If it's not heard, then move on. But don't move on before you have the job. because it's easier to find a job in a job. Before I leave Nomtandazo, I want to quote in page 134, I quote, "Black men benefit from racial diversity, while white women benefit from gender diversity. The whole world is busy patting itself on the back for progress, and no one is realizing that there is someone not in the room, Black women." Close quote. Would they care if they realize? Assuming they don't realize. What's your message to the white women and the Black men in power? What do you understand by intersectionality?
Would they care? I definitely cannot be responding for them. But it's unfortunate. I mean, even if when you look at our stock exchange, the demographics of leadership, it's unfortunate, right? And I think I do quote when I did research, just examples of periods in our democratic history where, you know, where women were leading some of those listed companies. Most of the time it's white women, right? And where men were leading, or, you know, then it's Black men, you know, that tick that box. There's that reality, right? So it's just unfortunate. So I think people do need to care, right? And I think to quote Steve Biko around consciousness is that it's a state of mind, and it's a way of living life as well. And to quote Thomas Sankara, who says you need to dare to invent the future, right? So we need leaders who are conscious and are creating a future that resembles, you know, a better and more inclusive South Africa. Surely we can't leave it to Dr. Nelson Mandela to have wanted, you know, an inclusive, you know, society. We all have a role to play, but more so people that have power and influence and are decision makers. So I definitely would say they do need to care. You know, that was the first part. I think you asked other parts, but by intersectionality, what I understand is it's mostly around race, class, and gender, right? And how when those three meet, just the realities. And I think it also then touches on certain privileges, right? So for instance, I think in a country such as South Africa, you know, men get to walk around at certain times at night, and their lived reality is not getting harassed or you know be potentially victims at the hands of gender-based violence, for instance, right? But as a young woman or as a young Black woman, you know, with those intersectional realities, your reality and how you encounter different spaces is very different, you know? So it's around, and yeah, so I think there's a definite link to privilege when we talk about intersectional realities.
That is so true. And just to add, you know, you find that people lean towards their social identity of privilege. Men, the gender side, white women, the race side, and we don't have a social identity of privilege as Black women. So that is why you find that we're down there. And yes, there are many social identities, heterosexual versus homosexual, people with disabilities, but you actually, those that are in your face are race, social class, and gender, because when someone walks in, we are so judgmental, we put them in a social class box, gender and race, you know? So what I like that was done by Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka is the He for She initiative. Because the way I see it, and some people will say, hell no, but you know, men are in power. We may be able to liberate ourselves 5 generations from now, but we need conversations with them. We need to work with them. We need to work with white women, Black men, everyone, because the task is so big, so heavy, with such a long history, and it is deliberate. So when you call people out to say, hang on, it can't go on like this. Why don't we do it this way together? I do believe the more we do that is the more we might have a change, and I do believe we will have a change.
And just
Yes.
to link to that, Ma, another thing that we mustn't forget is that as Black women, remember, we were the last people to be recognized by the law in this country, right? So at the very end, after everyone else, you know, to be recognized as legal citizens who have a voice in this country, we must never forget that context, firstly. But secondly, there's also that theory around crab mentality, right? Because we're so used to being at the bottom, and may we not make this home, you know, for any longer. That crab mentality, apparently when you have a group of crabs, I haven't seen this, but they pull each other down, you know? That's something that just needs to be undone, but we need to understand the context of how, you know, we've just been put down for so long, for so long, so many times, and that just needs to change.
Yeah, it has to. And you know, I found that there are so many of those pockets of goodness, white women that are good. Tap into them and actually recognize them, acknowledge them, because then it's funny how people respond better to positive messages, you know, to a carrot, like Black men and even white men. So the message to the young person who's listening is that find goodness in people, because there is a lot of goodness. And when you find it, acknowledge it and use it. It's very important.
Absolutely.
We're coming to, yeah.
I can attest to that. I really can. I've had Black male mentors, white women mentors, Indian male mentors, you know, so it's really a lived reality. But it also, there's a role you need to play as well, right? There's a role you need to play. But yeah, reaching out to people and the good people you guys will meet each other. They really do exist.
It's actually, when you said that, you reminded me, it's a give and take. Life is about a give and take. Somewhere in the book, you talk about the people that are in your life, but they don't want to be there. They're kicking and screaming. You don't need them, you know? And I admired that, because I actually wasn't in a position to admit to that at your age, because those people exist in families. They exist everywhere. And you almost think, because we have this relationship, I need to have these toxic relationships to maintain whatever status quo. And you're right. And you know, you're brighter than I am, because it took me very long to realize that. Just sharing something that I experienced. In 2012, I was in the field doing my research on the intersectionality of social identities, like the ones that you mentioned, race, gender, and social class. And I looked not just in South Africa, but in different geographies too. And one of the books that was shared by my sponsor, Professor Stella Nkomo, that I hold in very high regard, was based on a study that they did 10 years earlier in the US, comparing the experiences of Black women versus white women in the corporate. What concerned me is how the stories were similar a decade later in a different continent. And sadly, yet another decade later, I'm listening to your stories and they are similar to ours. What will it take to achieve equity across race, gender, and all other social identities? It's a heavy question for someone your age, for anyone. But I just have this belief in you that you can say maybe 1, 2, 3 things that we can start as a movement to investigate and try and do something.
It really is a loaded question, right? But I'll give it my best shot. I think earlier I mentioned the Thomas Sankara quote that says, "Dare to invent the future," right? I really believe that we need, you know, more leadership that is interested in the progress of society. right? And just the progress of us as a people as well. There's lots of research around how when you embrace and you advocate for diversity and inclusion, how it actually impacts the bottom line in a positive way, right? When you have people from different backgrounds, from different cultures, from different educational backgrounds as well, the outcome is just richer. It's just richer. It just works for everyone. But a certain level of openness, of recognizing the importance of doing that, is needed, before or trying to achieve equity. But it takes people who have a great sense of self, and then want that for other people too, right? And in my opinion, that's what the material, the ingredients leadership should be made of, so that's definitely what we need. People who know how to introspect, so they can outrospect and just want better, not only for themselves, but for the greater good of humanity, dare I say.
I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the things I advocate for is the intergenerational conversations, intergender, intersocial class. We need networking and having these conversations and almost agree on targets as to what we'll be pursuing in a certain period, and come and compare notes to say, how is it going, So I'm saying it's not going to happen on its own. It needs each one of us. Now, I actually am very aware of the many, many people who are on this call, and we couldn't thank you more, because if you are not here, we'll be talking to ourselves. I'll now go to the questions that you have. For now, I have about 14 questions. One of my clients asked me, what is your target market for this book? Entry-level, mid-career, or senior executives?
Okay. For all of them. That is the target. The target audience is all of the above. And it's been interesting, Ma, because with the feedback as well, I haven't only heard from young people that are at intern level, others are entry level. I've also heard from older women who are saying, some are saying, wow, I wish I'd picked this book up before I started working 15 years ago. Some are at executive and director level, and they're saying, okay, thank you. Now I know how to better manage my young Black female professionals, that are in my team. So I definitely would say it's for all of those people. And not only my book, I want to give a shout out to Sihle Bolani, who wrote We Are the Ones We Need. And hi to her if she's on the call. And recently I've learned of 2 other books as well. Carice Anderson's Intelligence Isn't Enough, that I'm yet to pick up, and another one by Lwando Tlaso called Made in South Africa, a reflection on Black women's stories. So there's a number of these books that we can use as tools.
Actually, you're so correct. And if I may answer, having read it in my 60s, it actually targets everyone. Everyone, not only Black women, by the way. If we have to have everyone around the table to understand our story and our journey and be an accomplice in sorting it, we need men to read it across race. We need women across race. So this is a book for everyone. If I may just navigate here. Lorraine Sitole says, in the book, you mentioned the burden of being Black and female. How is that a barrier to career progression? And what does it look like in the workplace?
Look, I don't think it's a burden. No. You're saying I mentioned that it's a burden? Can you just repeat that question? No?
Let's go. I need someone to.
Did she say, how is it a barrier? Is that what I?
Lorraine Sitole, the burden of being Black and female. How is that a barrier to career progression? Assuming someone said it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I do mention the burden of being Black and female, right? But I don't think it necessarily is a barrier to career progression. I think the thing, limitations, I think that it's a two-pronged thing, right? So there's yourself as well. That plays a role in your limitation. So how you see yourself, what you think about yourself, who you're trying to become. Do you articulate that clearly in your everyday lived reality? Are you adding value in the spaces that you're in, the people that you encounter? Do people in your, workplace go, oh, I'd like to have that young lady in my team or not, right? There's that, but there are also the structural realities, right? Which unfortunately, I think as this conversation has been going, isn't going to be dissolved overnight. And it isn't a woman-only reality. But in my opinion, it's definitely two-pronged, right? There's the you and yourself, and what you believe of yourself and what you're trying to achieve and how you communicate that to the world. And there's definitely the structural things that require the likes of this book, the other books that I mentioned, the movements that we need. So I think the barrier is in those two things. But we should try less and less to see our Black femaleness, as a contributor to that barrier, but try, spin it to the positive.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I would be remiss not to call it what it is. Your career progression is affected by your social identity, period. The research I did showed that the more social identity of disadvantage you had, the harder you had to work, the more degrees you had to have, and the more visible in terms of the work that you do, you have to be. It is irritating if you've lived it, but it doesn't mean you can't achieve it. And we wouldn't be truthful if we didn't say to the young Black woman, you have it in you to beat the system and do well, but just know that you have to work hard because we are different. And the dominant culture is not our culture yet. Till it is, we have to work that much harder. And thanks very much for that insight. How do you advise, this is good news, young Black women to see intersectionality as a source of power and blessing? I think we've addressed that. Manuku says, how do you build your confidence in a system that seemingly operates against the idea of the Black girl's success? I think you've addressed it.
Yeah.
Or owning your voice and doing your best. I think we have quite a few questions, so I'll try to get to as many as possible. No, Zizwe, I've had these conversations with Black men, and some genuinely believe we seek to be excused from competence and merit by virtue of being Black women. How do we sensitize Black men to these issues? I think that's an important one.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I guess with that, I would say it's a bit tricky because it's about taking the horse to the river and not being able to force it to drink, right? But I've been privileged in that I have these conversations with my Black male peers, right? Some of them have been coaches and advisors and mentors as well. You need to continually bring people into your lived reality, right? And I mean, I found with my male friends, who are doing well, in their corporate careers, is just continually having the conversation, because you can never assume people know what you're going through, right? So bring them close. I went, because they do have a privilege. I once attended a talk where Andile Kumalo was a speaker, and he called them the privilege systems out, not only a white male privilege system or white woman privilege system, but Black male privilege as well, but instead of shouting or talking down to men or Black men particularly, bring them in at your level and continually have the conversations. I think, as you mentioned earlier, Ma, it's not going to happen overnight, right? Having a hashtag on social media is definitely not going to solve our problems. But it's definitely, it's bringing people into the fold to understand their privilege systems, you know, and hoping, you know, that they can want to do better, you know, and contribute to the conversation.
You're so right. Black man is not the enemy. They also have quite a bit to grapple with. So their privilege is not quite complete, in fairness. And I think we need to have conversations with them. As it's funny, Lindelwa, because when we're in the trenches to liberate this country politically, we were together, we were buddies, we had a common cause. But the minute there was this economic privilege that is looming, they use their social identity of privilege. They've done that. Now we need to have a conversation to say, we understand it's human nature, but guess what? If you bring us to that enclave, we can do better together. So I think that's the conversation that is not shouting at them, shouting out at them, hashtag these, they are that, because human nature, guys, we may not understand because we don't have social identity of privilege. So let's just empathize with them and tell them what the advantage will be if we work together, because we did it in the trenches. So we can do it for economic independence, which we are so far from achieving. Thanks for those insights, Lindelwa. Pumelele says, thank you so much for the great webinar. Just a quick question on how one can find themselves in spaces of influence, because in the corporate space, decision makers in boardrooms are usually old white men who have no care in the world on who you are and what your dreams are. How does one navigate to find themselves in those spaces of influence? Note that I'll go on to make sure I just read quite a few. What do you think about people, about the quote, good girls don't make history? I find that people often think you have to be aggressive and loud to lead. And Simangele says, what do you think are the 3 biggest challenges faced by Black women in corporates, and what do you think can be the solutions? So I'll leave you to choose which one you go for first. I know what I'm doing to you is what I always tell people not to do to me.
I got the first 2, not the third one. The first was about spaces of influence and the old white men. Yeah, and the second was about
the 3 challenges. The 3 challenges that Black women face, and then the quote,
good girls don't make history.
Yes.
Okay, so the one about the spaces of influence, and again, I really don't want to nullify the difficulty in the various corporate spaces we find in South Africa, but you always find in a group of people that appear difficult, there's always 1 or 2 that are, you know, willing to chat or willing to have the conversation. And you also need to be willing to be vulnerable, right? I think I also mentioned in the book that when I approach, and it doesn't have to be a C-suite level exec, right? It can be someone just a layer above you, or someone that's your peer. I have mentors that are my peers and my friends as well. It doesn't have to be someone who's way older and super successful. So look across all the different streams, but be willing to be, firstly, you need to, what my mentors have taught me is be clear about what you want to get out of the mentor as well, right? You can't seek mentorship from someone because they're older and they're successful and that's that. What's in that person that you feel you need to learn you know, from, or if you've done an analysis on yourself that where you've identified your area of growth or improvement, and that's what that person can help you with. So do that self-work first, but identify those people and reach out to them. Right. And I think another thing a Black man once taught me is, what's the worst that can happen, right? So a person will say no and your life will stay the same, right? It won't be any worse. So put yourself out there, but also try not to look only in your immediate environment, right? So mentors and decision makers and influential people in your life don't have to be the ones that are in your immediate space. It could be people that are outside your organization. It could be someone that works, you know, at your friend's organization, or someone else that I've written to people on social media that I don't know. I did this twice with Fred Swanica.
Yeah.
And with Mzamo Masito, who works at Google. And I said, hi, I really admire the work that you do, I'd like to have a coffee. And they agreed. But when you get to that conversation again, what do you need, and you can have a strong, you know, meaningful conversation based on that. The quote, good girls don't make history, I actually really, I like, it's one of my favorite quotes. And the thing is, I think as the person asking the question mentioned, you really, and as I've proven with myself, you don't have to be a loud and an aggressive person, right? You can be witty and rebellious in your own way, right? You can be a gracious, rebellious person, right? You know, you really, there isn't one way of looking at it, or going about making history. Or not being a good girl, but just find your own way of doing it, and it will come out authentically, and you will make history. You will be a good girl making history in your own soft, rebellious way.
I so agree with you. You know, I just want to add, that is so true, the way you dealt with mentorship. The only thing I would add is that I find that life is about give and take. What are you bringing to your mentor?
Yes.
You know, there's something nice that your mentee knows your interest area, and they find an article as an example and say, Ma, have you seen this? What do you think? It's like, we learn from you guys as the elders. And so if we share that, there is something to give. Even when you approach someone, you actually want to almost have something that matters to them, rather than just expecting them to mentor you. And you are so right when it comes to the good girl story. I find that each one of us is here to just be the best you are meant to be, the way you are, you know? So you don't have to be loud if you're not loud, but you have to be persistent and deliberate and confident. And persistent because sometimes people will push you and ignore you. There's one instance that I'm going to forget the name now. But anyway, she was saying, you know, in a board meeting, one executive would say something, and because there is a podium of other executives, I wouldn't say anything. I would go to him afterwards and say, you know, when you did this, when you said this, this is how I felt. And I don't take kindly to it. And you know, bullies are cowards. You shut them up, but gracefully. Someone would say, oh, she just allows that, but it's not the right place. So know how the tactics of dealing with prejudice and bullies. But thanks very much for that. Raibetswe, I also want to do the close. Hi, Lindelwa. Thank you for this amazing interview, and thanks specifically to Lindelwa for the book. I agree. Anonymous, it's a long one. I want to read it. Workplace issues can be so isolating. I remember when I was bullied, I was shocked and in disbelief. It's the second one on bullying, at least the one I've seen. It didn't break me down, but I didn't know how to address it. I knew I had to speak out and do something. Long story short, the bully apologized in the presence of a third party and turned around and said he didn't mean it when we were alone. I was not singled out, but things were never the same. I left that place in a rush and landed in another bad environment. There were other people who supported me, but there were a lot of conflicting voices. Some of the ideas shared was that we need to be careful in how we handle these issues so that we don't create the perception that Black people are difficult to manage. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure.
A tough one.
Yo, it really is a tough one, Ma. And yeah, it makes me reflect on the period and the chapter that I mentioned in the book around toxic workplaces. And if the person that wrote that question, if there's anything to go by, they should read Sihle Bolani's We Are the Ones We Need. I mean, that whole book covers workplace incivility. And I mean, it's if the person who wrote the question is Black and if they're female, it's even worse, because when you look at those intersectional topics, it's even more loaded, right? So again, when you go back to the history of the oppression of women, but even the oppression of Black people as a people, we carry so much anxiety, pain, hurt, and there's a lot of healing that's still required, right? So when you walk into spaces that don't affirm you, that don't empower you, it just further breaks you down. And I just want to say to the person that asked that question is actually from June, I'm going to be doing some Instagram live series with psychologists and with life coaches. Having those discussions around, how to best deal with such, because I really think we need a professional lens to come into that as well, because there's only so much you can do as an individual as well, right? And it just becomes tough when a culture of a space is one of breaking down and tearing. But I think to what a mentor had mentioned and what you had said as well, Ma, is in your own way confronting the people that try to perpetuate that sort of behavior and workplace culture. But this is where leadership is required as well, right? So the deliberate intent around the spaces you're trying to create, because I think in the book I mentioned, there's also research, well, it's American, around how every year organizations in the US lose about $300 billion to issues related to workplace stresses. If we were contributing to environments that are gonna not benefit the greater good of the organization, then what's the purpose? What are we really doing?
You raise a good question. I always say we undermine the importance of a racial and gender superiority, because that's what it's about. The research has been done. You talk about $3 trillion that we could have add to the GDP if we actually just pay women what they deserve. But that's the price they are prepared to pay. So the battle is tough, and we need to be very cognizant of the fact that that's the price they are prepared to pay. So we need to find ways of tackling the challenge, because it's a big one. Anonymous, the other one that I would say in terms of this bullying, sometimes you need to go outside yourself and approach leadership as a generic, that I understand there is bullying. How can you assist? Sometimes you need to play those tactics if you are afraid that it will be sent back to you. But even there are always leaders that are receptive. Use them, Going to the next one, we only have, time is up. Do you really believe it possible to create a mess? By the way, shout out, Sihle, I saw your message. And thanks very much, Lindelwa, for recognizing other women. There is another message that says, how do we show empathy to other women and support each other? You're doing just that right now. So this one, do you really believe it possible to create a mass successful company only Black female? Many of my friends are afraid. Having a white man behind you owning the company feels safe. I have an answer for this, but let me hear you.
I believe it is possible, Ma. And I think it's been done when we look at associations, right? So even with what we try to do within the movement, but I think it would be remiss to definitely only want to do that, because we've also just said there's power in diversity and inclusion. Yes, we need to tilt the scale in upping, the economic impact and benefits for women, particularly Black women, but there's more benefits in diverse and inclusive teams and spaces. Yes, we need to be seen, we need to raise our voices and use each other. I think, as I do say in the book here, as we're about to close, as I say here, I want us Black women who many times in history have been the least prioritized to use our voices, talents, and tools and one another to reaffirm our voices, purpose, and our existence. So we need each other, but we need everyone else.
Yeah, that's so true. In the last seconds, what's your final message?
My final message is I'm saying to all women, more especially to Black women, step up and step into yourself. And you need to know and believe, my favorite Maya Angelou quote, you appear as one, but you stand as 10,000.
Oh, yeah.
We stand on the shoulders of many men and women who have walked before us. You need to believe that.
Amazing. I couldn't agree with you more. I found it so interesting that most of, actually every person you've mentioned is someone that I look up to, whether it was a leader, whether it was someone that wrote something. It is actually, it's quite interesting. But so proud of you, Lindelwa, a proud mother who cannot believe that you've done so many things. Congratulations again on the 2 beds. And please do get this book. It's an amazing book, even for someone my age who thinks I've seen it all. Obviously, I haven't. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ma.
Thanks for joining and enjoy your evening. If we didn't get to your question, I think you can send your question to the Black Girls Guide. Which platform do you prefer, Lindelwa? Is it Instagram?
On Instagram, and on Instagram, the email address is on there as well. So blackgirlsguide_ZA.
Please, if you can send those questions, the conversation doesn't end now. Let's have these intergenerational conversations so that we achieve gender equality, racial and gender equality. Those two live together. Thank you so much. And thanks for the platform to Exclusive Books. Everything of the best.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Sure, thanks.